Jacob Harper was a man who carried the weight of the world on his shoulders, though he never complained. Life hadn't been kind to him, but he had learned to make do with what little he had. A single father raising two young children, Lily, an energetic 8-year-old with pigtails that bounced when she laughed, and Max, a curious 5-year-old who loved dinosaurs more than anything else. He worked tirelessly as a mechanic at a small garage on the edge of town. His hands were calloused from fixing cars all day, and his clothes often smelled faintly of grease, but Jacob didn't mind. He did it all for his kids. Their home wasn't much, a modest 1-bedroom apartment in a quiet corner of the city, but it was theirs. The walls were painted a faded yellow, the furniture was secondhand, and there were always toys scattered across the floor, but it felt like a sanctuary to Jacob and his children. They made the most of their humble surroundings, finding joy in simple things, playing board games by candlelight during power outages, sharing bowls of popcorn while watching old cartoons, or reading bedtime stories under mismatched blankets. This particular evening, however, the atmosphere outside was far from peaceful. Dark clouds loomed overhead, heavy with rain, and the wind howled through the narrow streets. Thunder rumbled in the distance, making the windows shake slightly. Inside the apartment, Jacob tucked Lily and Max into bed, pulling the covers up to their chins as they giggled about the storm. "Daddy, is the thunder mad at us?" Max asked, clutching his favorite stuffed T-Rex tightly. "No, buddy," Jacob replied with a soft smile. "It's just nature putting on a show. Now close your eyes and try to sleep." As he turned off the bedside lamp, another clap of thunder echoed through the room, followed almost immediately by a sharp knock at the door. Jacob froze. It wasn't common for visitors to drop by unannounced, especially not during such a fierce storm. Curiosity mingled with caution as he walked toward the entrance, peering through the peephole. Standing on the other side was a teenage girl, drenched from head to toe. Her dark hair clung to her face, water dripping onto the floor beneath her feet. She wore a plain hoodie and jeans, both soaked through, and carried a small backpack slung over one shoulder. Something about her expression, a mix of vulnerability and determination, made Jacob hesitate before opening the door. "Can I help you?" he asked cautiously, leaving the chain lock in place for now. The girl looked up, her brown eyes wide and pleading. "I'm sorry to bother you," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "My name is Emily. I missed my bus after visiting some friends nearby and, well, I don't know where else to go. Could I stay here for just one night? Please?" Jacob frowned, torn between suspicion and sympathy. Strangers knocking on doors late at night weren't something to take lightly, especially when you had kids to protect. But there was something genuine about Emily's demeanor. No trace of malice or deceit, only exhaustion and desperation. Plus, the storm showed no signs of letting up anytime soon. After a moment's deliberation, Jacob unlatched the chain and opened the door wider. "Come in," he said firmly but gently. "You can't stay out there in this weather." Emily stepped inside hesitantly, leaving wet footprints on the worn carpet. Jacob grabbed a towel from the bathroom and handed it to her. "Here, dry yourself off. I'll find something warm for you to wear." While Emily dried her hair and changed into an oversized sweatshirt and pair of sweatpants Jacob dug out from his closet, he busied himself preparing a quick meal. There wasn't much in the fridge, just leftover pasta, a few slices of bread, and some canned vegetables, but it would have to do. As he heated the food on the stovetop, Lily and Max peeked out from their bedroom, drawn by the sound of unfamiliar voices. "Who's that, Daddy?" Lily whispered, pointing toward the living room where Emily sat wrapped in a blanket. "That's Emily," Jacob explained quietly. "She got caught in the storm and needed a place to stay for tonight. Be nice, okay?" The kids nodded eagerly and approached Emily with childlike curiosity. "Hi," Lily chirped, holding up a crayon drawing of a rainbow. "I made this today. Do you want to see?" Emily smiled faintly, her guard lowering as she accepted the picture. "Wow, that's really good. Did you draw all these colors yourself?" "Yep," Lily beamed proudly. Meanwhile, Max held up his toy dinosaur. "This is Rex. He fights bad guys. Do you want to play?" For the first time since arriving, Emily chuckled softly. Sure, why not? Watching the scene unfold, Jacob felt a pang of relief. His instincts told him Emily wasn't a threat. Instead, she seemed genuinely grateful for their hospitality. Still, he couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to her story than she let on. For now, though, he pushed those thoughts aside and focused on ensuring everyone stayed comfortable. Dinner was a surprisingly pleasant affair. Despite the meager spread, Emily ate heartily, complimenting Jacob on the meal. Conversation flowed easily, with Lily and Max dominating the discussion by recounting amusing anecdotes from school. Emily listened intently, occasionally chiming in with her own observations. Though she remained guarded about her personal life, her interactions revealed glimpses of warmth and humor. By the time the clock struck 9, the storm had begun to subside. Jacob cleared the dishes while Emily helped tuck the kids back into bed, reading them a short story until their eyelids grew heavy. Once they were asleep, Jacob returned to the living room where Emily sat gazing out the window at the rain-soaked streets below. "You didn't have to do all this for me," she murmured without turning around. "But thank you. I really appreciate it." Jacob shrugged, leaning against the doorway. "It's no trouble. We've all been in situations where we needed a helping hand. Besides, you seem like a good kid." Emily glanced at him, her expression unreadable. "You'd be surprised," she muttered under her breath. Before Jacob could respond, she stood abruptly and retrieved her backpack. "I should probably get going soon. My dad must be worried sick." Jacob raised an eyebrow. "Your dad? You mentioned earlier that you were visiting friends. Is everything okay at home?" Emily hesitated, then forced a smile. "Yeah, everything's fine, just complicated. Thanks again for letting me crash here, I won't forget it." Though her words sounded sincere, Jacob sensed there was more to her story. Before he could press further, Emily zipped up her bag and headed for the door. Lightning flashed outside, illuminating her silhouette as she paused briefly in the threshold. "Take care of yourself, Jacob," she said softly, before stepping into the damp night air and disappearing into the shadows. Standing there alone, Jacob couldn't shake the nagging feeling that their paths were destined to cross again. The next morning, Jacob woke up to the sound of birds chirping outside his window, a stark contrast to the stormy chaos of the previous night. The sun streamed through the cracks in the blinds, casting golden streaks across the worn carpet. For a moment, he wondered if the events of the evening before had been nothing more than a dream. But then he noticed the damp towel draped over the back of a chair and the oversized sweatshirt folded neatly on the couch. No, it wasn't a dream. Emily had been real, and she had stayed under his roof for one brief but unforgettable night. Jacob shuffled into the kitchen to start breakfast. His mind wandered back to their conversation. There was something about her, something unspoken that lingered in his thoughts. She had seemed grateful, yes, but also distant, as though she were carrying a secret too heavy for someone so young. Her mention of complications at home had struck him as odd. What kind of complications could drive a teenager to wander alone in the middle of a storm? He shook his head, reminding himself that it wasn't his place to pry. People had their reasons, and sometimes those reasons were best left untouched. Breakfast was a quiet affair. Lily and Max were still groggy from sleep, munching on cereal while Jacob prepared scrambled eggs. The kids didn't bring up Emily right away, which surprised him. Usually they were full of questions about anyone who crossed their path. But when Lily finally spoke, her words came out softly, almost wistfully. "Do you think Emily will come back?" she asked, twirling her spoon in her bowl. Jacob glanced at her, noticing the hint of longing in her voice. "I don't know, sweetheart. She said she needed to get home to her dad." Max frowned, looking up from his dinosaur book. "But why did she leave so fast? We were having fun." "I think she just wanted to make sure her family wasn't worried," Jacob replied, trying to sound reassuring. "Sometimes people have responsibilities they can't ignore." Lily nodded slowly, though she didn't look entirely convinced. Jacob knew how much his kids craved connection. They rarely had visitors, let alone someone close to their age like Emily. Her sudden appearance and departure must have felt like a whirlwind to them. He made a mental note to spend extra time. With them later, maybe take them to the park or bake cookies together to lift their spirits. After cleaning up the dishes, Jacob headed out to work. The garage where he spent most of his days was located a few miles away, tucked between a hardware store and a bakery. It wasn't glamorous, but it paid the bills, and the owner, Mr. Harris, was fair enough not to mind when Jacob occasionally brought the kids along during school holidays. Today, however, Jacob couldn't shake the feeling that something unusual was waiting for him. Maybe it was the lingering mystery of Emily's visit, or maybe it was just the calm after the storm, but either way, he found himself distracted as he changed the oil in a beat-up sedan and patched up a flat tire. When lunchtime rolled around, Jacob decided to treat himself to a sandwich from the bakery next door. As he stood in line scrolling absent-mindedly through his phone, a notification popped up, a text from an unknown number. Curious, he opened it and read the message. "Thank you again for everything last night. You saved me." Jacob blinked, rereading the words several times. The number wasn't saved in his contacts, but there was no mistaking who it was from. He quickly typed back, "Emily, is that you? Are you okay?" A reply came almost instantly. "Yes, it's me. I'm fine now, safe and sound, thanks to you." Relief washed over Jacob, though questions still swirled in his mind. He hesitated before responding. "You're welcome, but are you sure everything's all right at home? If you ever need anything." Before he could finish typing, another message appeared. "I'll be okay. Just promise me one thing. Don't forget about me." Jacob smiled faintly, touched by her request. "I won't," he wrote back. "Take care of yourself, Emily." With that, the conversation ended, leaving Jacob with a mix of emotions. Part of him wished he could do more to help her, but another part understood that some battles weren't his to fight. All he could do was trust that she would find her way. Later that afternoon, as Jacob returned home after a long day of work, he noticed something unusual on the kitchen counter. An envelope sat there, plain and unmarked, with his name scrawled across the front in neat handwriting. Intrigued, he picked it up and opened it. Inside was a stack of crisp $100 bills, far more money than Jacob had ever held in his hands at once. Beneath the cash lay a folded piece of paper. Unfolding it, he read the short note written inside. "Thank you for your kindness. Please use this to take care of your family. You deserve it." Jacob stared at the money in the note, stunned. His first instinct was to track down Emily and return it. This wasn't his to keep, but deep down he knew she wouldn't accept it back. Instead, he tucked the envelope into a drawer, resolving to figure out what to do with it later. For now, he focused on making dinner for his kids, determined to give them the best meal possible despite the whirlwind of thoughts swirling in his head. That evening, as Lily and Max played with their toys on the living room floor, Jacob watched them with a newfound sense of gratitude. Life might have thrown its share of challenges his way, but moments like these reminded him why he kept pushing forward. And though he didn't fully understand what role Emily had played in their lives, or what secrets she carried, he couldn't deny that her brief presence had left an indelible mark. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink, Jacob found himself thinking about the girl who had shown up on his doorstep during a storm. Whoever she was, wherever she came from, she had trusted him enough to seek refuge in his home. And in doing so, she had reminded him of something important. Even in the darkest times, acts of kindness could shine brighter than any storm. A week had passed since Emily's unexpected visit, and life in Jacob's small apartment had returned to its usual rhythm. The envelope filled with cash still sat tucked away in a drawer, untouched. Jacob hadn't mentioned it to anyone, not even Lily or Max, and he wrestled with what to do about it. On one hand, the money could ease so many of their struggles: overdue bills, new shoes for the kids, maybe even a few months where they didn't have to count every penny. But on the other hand, accepting such generosity felt wrong somehow, like taking advantage of a situation he barely understood. Despite his internal conflict, Jacob tried to focus on the present. He worked long hours at the garage, came home to cook dinner for his kids, and spent evenings reading bedtime stories or helping Lily practice her spelling words. Yet no matter how hard he tried to push thoughts of Emily out of his mind, she lingered there, a shadowy figure, whose brief appearance had left an unshakable impression. It was on a Tuesday afternoon, 2 days after Jacob finally decided to deposit half of the money into his bank account, just enough to cover immediate needs, that everything changed again. As he pulled into the parking lot of his building after work, he noticed something unusual. A sleek black car parked near the entrance. It looked completely out of place among the rusty sedans and battered trucks that usually occupied the space. Jacob furrowed his brow, wondering if someone had come to visit one of his neighbors. When he stepped out of his own weathered truck, however, he saw 3 men standing by the car. They were dressed sharply in suits, their polished shoes gleaming under the late afternoon sun. One of them held a clipboard while another carried a leather briefcase. The sight made Jacob uneasy. Suits like these didn't belong in his part of town unless trouble was brewing. "Mr. Harper?" one of the men called out, approaching him with a polite but firm demeanor. Jacob hesitated, clutching the strap of his toolbox tighter. "Yeah, that's me. What's going on?" The man extended a hand, which Jacob shook cautiously. "My name is Mr. Caldwell. I'm a private investigator working on behalf of Richard Langley." When Jacob's expression remained blank, the man clarified. "Emily Langley's father." At the mention of Emily's last name, Jacob's stomach dropped. Suddenly, pieces began falling into place. The expensive backpack she'd carried, despite her modest clothing, the crispness of her voice when she spoke, the way she seemed uncomfortable discussing her family. He swallowed hard, trying to keep his composure. "We've been searching for Emily for weeks," Mr. Caldwell continued. "She ran away from home, and we believe you may have encountered her recently." Jacob nodded slowly, his heart pounding. "Yes, she stayed here for one night during the storm. She said she missed her bus and needed shelter. I didn't think much of it, I just wanted to help." The investigators exchanged glances, their expressions softening slightly. "You did the right thing, Mr. Harper," another man chimed in. "Emily is safe now. She returned home a few days ago and has been reunited with her family." Relief washed over Jacob, though it was tinged with confusion. "Why are you here then? If she's okay?" Mr. Caldwell adjusted his tie before speaking. "Emily shared details about her time with you, including your kindness and generosity. Mr. Langley is incredibly grateful for what you did. He wishes to express his appreciation personally." Jacob blinked, taken aback. "Personally? Look, I don't need anything." Before he could finish, Mr. Caldwell handed him another envelope. This one was thicker than the first, sealed with an embossed insignia that screamed wealth. "Please accept this as a token of gratitude," he said firmly, "and please consider reaching out to us if you'd like to discuss further opportunities." With that, the men tipped their hats, climbed back into the black car and drove off, leaving Jacob standing alone in the parking lot. His hands trembled as he opened the envelope. Inside was yet another stack of cash, this time significantly larger, as well as a handwritten letter on heavy parchment paper. The elegant script read, "Dear Mr. Harper, I cannot thank you enough for the compassion you showed my daughter during her time of need. Your actions reflect the very best of humanity, and I will forever be indebted to you. Please know that this gesture is merely a fraction of what I wish to offer. Should you ever require assistance or support, do not hesitate to reach out. You and your family deserve nothing less than the world. Sincerely, Richard Langley." Jacob stared at the letter, his mind racing. Billionaire Richard Langley. The name sounded familiar, though Jacob couldn't quite place it. He vaguely remembered seeing it in headlines or advertisements associated with luxury real estate developments and high-profile business deals. Whatever the case, it was clear that Emily wasn't just any teenager. She was the daughter of one of the wealthiest men in the country. Overwhelmed, Jacob sat down on the curb, the envelope clutched tightly in his hands. Thoughts swirled through his head. How had he unknowingly crossed paths with someone so far, removed from his own reality? And what exactly did this mean for him and his children? Later that evening, Jacob sat at the kitchen table, staring at the letter and the pile of money spread out before him. Lily and Max were asleep, their soft breathing filling the quiet apartment. For the first time in years, Jacob allowed himself to dream. Not wild, unrealistic dreams of fame or fortune, but practical ones. Could he finally afford to fix the leaky roof, replace the ancient refrigerator that broke down every other month? Maybe even enroll Lily in art classes or sign Max up for soccer? But alongside these hopeful thoughts came a wave of guilt. Was it fair to accept such generosity? He hadn't done anything extraordinary. He'd simply opened his door to someone in need. Surely others would have done the same. As he wrestled with his conscience, Jacob realized something important. This wasn't just about him anymore. It was about Lily and Max. They deserved a chance to live without constant worry, to experience the kind of stability and opportunity that had eluded Jacob throughout his life. If Richard Langley truly wanted to repay him, perhaps it was worth considering. The next morning, Jacob decided to write a response. He thanked Mr. Langley for his generosity but emphasized that he didn't expect anything more. Still, curiosity got the better of him, and he added a line asking if they might meet someday. Partly to understand Emily's story better, partly to see if there was a way to build a brighter future for his family. Days turned into weeks, and just when Jacob thought the matter was closed, another envelope arrived in the mail. This time it contained an invitation to dinner at the Langley estate. The address listed was in an upscale neighborhood miles away from Jacob's cramped apartment, a world he could scarcely imagine. Enclosed was a note from Emily herself. "Hi, Jacob, I hope you're doing well. My dad really wants to meet you. He says you remind him of the kind of person he used to be before. Well, before everything got complicated. Please say yes. I owe you so much, and I want to make sure you know how much you've changed my life. See you soon, Emily," Jacob read the note several times, his heart swelling with emotion. Against all odds, a single act of kindness had connected him to people who lived in a completely different universe. And though uncertainty still lingered, one thing was certain. His life, and the lives of his children, would never be the same again. The day of the dinner invitation arrived, and Jacob found himself standing in front of his closet, staring at the limited options hanging there. Most of his clothes were stained with grease or frayed from years of wear, but he managed to find a pair of dark jeans and a clean button-up shirt that had been tucked away for special occasions. He wasn't sure what special meant anymore. His idea of fancy was usually a trip to the diner down the street, but tonight felt different. Tonight he was stepping into an entirely new world. As he dressed, Lily and Max buzzed around him excitedly. They had never seen their dad so nervous before, and it intrigued them. "Are we going somewhere cool, Daddy?" Max asked, clutching his toy dinosaur as if it might somehow tag along on this adventure. "No, buddy," Jacob replied with a small smile. "This one's just for me." "But why can't we come?" Lily pouted, crossing her arms over her chest. "We liked Emily." Jacob knelt down to their level, placing a hand on each of their shoulders. "I know you did, sweetheart, and maybe someday you'll get to see her again. But this is, well, it's kind of grown-up stuff. You two stay here and behave for Mrs. Parker next door, okay? I promise I'll tell you all about it when I get back." With reluctant nods, the kids hugged him tightly before running off to play. Jacob watched them for a moment, feeling a pang of guilt mixed with determination. Whatever happened tonight, he reminded himself, would be for them, for their future. Taking a deep breath, he grabbed his keys and headed out the door. The drive to the Langley estate felt surreal. Jacob followed the GPS directions, which led him further and further away from the familiar streets of his neighborhood. The roads grew wider, the houses larger, until he finally turned onto a private lane flanked by towering trees. At the end of the driveway stood a mansion so grand it looked like something out of a movie. Its white columns gleamed under the golden glow of outdoor lights, and perfectly manicured gardens surrounded the property. Jacob parked his old truck beside a row of luxury cars, feeling painfully out of place. Before he could second-guess himself, a uniformed valet approached him with a polite smile. "Good evening, sir. May I assist you?" Yeah," Jacob stammered, handing over his keys. "Thanks." He stepped out of the vehicle, smoothing his shirt self-consciously as he walked toward the entrance. A butler greeted him at the door, ushering him inside with an air of practiced elegance. The interior of the house was even more breathtaking than the exterior. Crystal chandeliers hung from high ceilings, marble floors gleamed beneath his feet, and artwork adorned the walls. It was overwhelming, yet strangely beautiful. Before Jacob could fully take it all in, Richard Langley appeared, striding toward him with an easy confidence that matched his surroundings. He was tall and impeccably dressed, with silver streaks in his dark hair and a warm smile that put Jacob slightly at ease. "Mr. Harper," Richard said, extending a hand. "Thank you for coming. Please, call me Richard." "Nice to meet you." Richard," Jacob replied, shaking his hand firmly. "And thanks for having me." Richard gestured for Jacob to follow him into a lavish dining room where a table was set with fine china and sparkling glasses. Sitting at the far end was Emily, looking both radiant and relaxed in a simple yet elegant dress. When she saw Jacob, her face lit up with genuine joy. "Jacob," she exclaimed, rising from her seat to greet him. "I'm so glad you came." "It's good to see you too, Emily," Jacob said, managing a nervous chuckle. You look great." The three of them sat down, and the conversation began. Richard wasted no time expressing his gratitude. "Emily has told me everything about her time with you," he said earnestly. "Your kindness during such a vulnerable moment for her, it's something I'll never forget. Not many people would open their home to a stranger, especially someone like me who comes from privilege." Jacob shifted uncomfortably in his chair. "It wasn't anything special. Anyone would have done the same." "That's where you're wrong," Richard countered. "Not everyone sees beyond their own struggles to help others. You reminded me of who I used to be, a man who cared more about people than profits." Their discussion flowed naturally from there, touching on topics ranging from family to work to life lessons. Jacob learned that Emily had run away because she felt suffocated by the expectations placed upon her as the daughter of a billionaire. She spoke candidly about how staying with Jacob and seeing his devotion to his children had inspired her to appreciate the simpler things in life. "You showed me what really matters," Emily admitted softly. "Love, connection, being present for the people you care about. Those are the things I want to focus on now." Her words struck a chord with Jacob, reminding him of why he worked so hard every day. Despite their vastly different circumstances, they shared a common bond, the desire to provide the best possible life for their loved ones. Dinner itself was exquisite, a multi-course meal prepared by a private chef, but Jacob barely noticed the food. His attention was focused entirely on the conversation unfolding around him. For the first time in years, he felt truly seen and valued, not for what he owned or achieved, but for who he was as a person. As dessert was served, Richard leaned forward, his expression serious yet kind. "Jacob, I'd like to propose something. I know my gratitude won't change your character, you're already a remarkable man, but I want to ensure your children have opportunities they deserve. I'd like to set up a trust fund for Lily and Max's education. Additionally, I have a managerial position available at one of my companies. It comes with stability, benefits, and a salary that will allow you to focus less on surviving and more on thriving." Jacob froze, stunned by the offer. He opened his mouth to protest, but Richard held up a hand. "Please, hear me out. This isn't charity. It's an investment in someone I believe in. You've proven yourself to be trustworthy, hardworking, and compassionate, all qualities I value deeply." For a moment, Jacob couldn't speak. The weight of the opportunity pressed down on him, mingling with emotions he hadn't anticipated. Finally, he nodded slowly. I don't know what to say. Thank you. Truly. But I want to earn this, not just accept it." Richard smiled approvingly. "That's exactly why I chose you." By the time Jacob returned home later that night, his mind was reeling. He tiptoed into the apartment, careful not to wake Lily and Max, and sank onto the couch. The events of the evening played over and over in his head like a movie reel. From the opulent mansion to Richard's generous offers, it all felt surreal. But amidst the whirlwind of thoughts, one thing stood out clearly. Life had given him a second chance. Not just for himself, but for his children. And he vowed to make the most of it, not for wealth or status, but for the love and security he could now provide. As he drifted off to sleep, Jacob allowed himself to dream again. Only this time, those dreams weren't tinged with fear or doubt. They were filled with hope, possibility, and the unwavering belief that kindness, even in its smallest forms, could change lives forever. Life began to transform for Jacob Harper and his children in ways he could never have imagined. The trust fund Richard Langley established for Lily and Max opened doors that had once seemed permanently closed. Lily, with her boundless creativity, enrolled in art classes at a prestigious community center, where she discovered a passion for painting. Her colorful canvases soon adorned the walls of their apartment, each piece telling a story of imagination and joy. Max, on the other hand, joined a local soccer team and quickly became the star player, his energy and determination earning cheers from teammates and parents alike. Jacob, too, embraced the new chapter in his life. He accepted Richard's offer of a managerial position at one of his companies, a mid-sized automotive repair chain, and threw himself into the role with the same dedication he'd shown as a mechanic. At first, the transition felt daunting. Managing schedules, overseeing budgets, and leading a team required skills Jacob hadn't fully developed. But Richard provided mentorship, encouraging him to take risks and learn from mistakes. Over time, Jacob grew into the role, earning the respect of his colleagues and finding satisfaction in his work that went beyond fixing cars. Despite the changes, Jacob remained grounded. He continued to live in their modest apartment, refusing to move until he felt financially secure enough to provide long-term stability for his family. "We don't need a big house to be happy," he told Lily and Max when they asked why they weren't moving to a fancier neighborhood. "What matters is being together." Emily stayed in touch, visiting occasionally or calling to check in on them. She often brought small gifts, books for Lily, puzzles for Max, and practical items like groceries or household supplies for Jacob. Though her visits were brief, they always left a lasting impression. Emily's gratitude was evident in every interaction, and her presence reminded Jacob of the profound impact a single act of kindness could have. One sunny Saturday afternoon, about 6 months after their initial meeting, Emily invited Jacob and his kids to spend the day at her father's estate. It wasn't just a casual outing. It was an opportunity for Emily to introduce them to her world, while staying true to the values she'd learned from Jacob. The invitation came with a note. "You've given me so much already. Let me give something back." On the morning of the visit, Lily and Max buzzed with excitement, dressed in their best clothes and clutching gifts they'd made for Emily. Jacob drove them to the estate, feeling a mix of anticipation and nostalgia. As they pulled up the driveway, the sprawling mansion looked even more majestic than before, surrounded by blooming gardens and shimmering fountains. A staff member greeted them warmly, guiding them inside where Emily waited with a wide smile. "Welcome," she exclaimed, hugging each of them tightly. "I'm so glad you're here." The day unfolded like a dream. They toured the estate, explored the gardens, and enjoyed a picnic lunch on the lawn overlooking a serene lake. Emily introduced them to her father, who regaled them with stories of his own humble beginnings and praised Jacob for inspiring him to reconnect with what truly mattered. For Lily and Max, it was an adventure filled with wonder. They marveled at the grandeur of the mansion, giggled during a game of hide-and-seek in the hedge maze, and even helped feed the koi fish in the pond. But the highlight of the day came when Emily led them to a quiet corner of the garden. There, beneath the shade of a towering oak tree, stood a wooden bench engraved with a simple message: "In memory of kindness that changes lives." Emily explained that she had commissioned it as a tribute to Jacob and his family. "I'll never forget how you welcomed me into your home without hesitation," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "You showed me that wealth doesn't define happiness, it's the connections we make and the love we share that truly matter. Thank you for teaching me that lesson." Jacob felt a lump rise in his throat as he hugged her. "Emily, you've taught us something too. You've reminded us that no matter where we come from, we're all human beings deserving of compassion and understanding." As the sun began to set, casting a golden glow over the estate, Jacob realized how far they had all come since that stormy night. His life wasn't perfect. He still faced challenges, and there were days when the weight of responsibility threatened to overwhelm him. But he no longer carried that burden alone. He had allies now: Richard, Emily, and most importantly, his children whose laughter echoed through the air as they played under the fading light. Months turned into years, and Jacob's family continued to thrive. Lily excelled in school, her artistic talents blossoming into a promising future. Max became a confident young boy, known not only for his soccer skills, but also for his kind heart and leadership on the field. Jacob, meanwhile, rose through the ranks at work, eventually becoming a regional manager responsible for multiple locations. Yet despite his success, he never forgot his roots or the lessons he'd learned along the way. Emily remained a cherished part of their lives. She visited whenever she could, bringing updates about her journey toward balancing privilege with purpose. Inspired by Jacob's humility, she pursued a career in social work, dedicating herself to helping others navigate difficult circumstances. Their bond deepened over time, built on mutual respect and shared experiences. Looking back, Jacob often reflected on how a single decision, to open his door to a stranger, had set off a chain reaction that transformed his life. It wasn't the money or opportunities that mattered most, though they certainly helped. What truly resonated was the reminder that even in the darkest moments, humanity had the power to shine brightly. And so, as Jacob tucked Lily and Max into bed one evening, listening to their excited chatter about the upcoming summer vacation Richard had offered to host at his beach house, he smiled to himself. Life had taken unexpected turns, but through it all, he had held on to the belief that kindness was its own reward. Sometimes he thought the smallest gestures could ripple outward, touching lives in ways no one could predict. And sometimes those ripples became waves that carried people to places they never dreamed possible.